What is happening, guys? Welcome back to the show. My name's Timmy Foodie, and today we're cooking my kind of little McRib sandwich. So there's some beautiful rib meat there. It's just pork ribs, free range. There's some beautiful soft white rolls that I bought as well that should work really nicely for this. There's a nice oven dish, and then some stuff that we're going to make a barbecue sauce with. We've got 2 tins of tomatoes. We've got some panela sugar, Worcestershire sauce, malt vinegar, salt, pepper, bit of mustard, some rice vinegar there, which we'll use for to pickle our onions with later. Super simple dish. It takes a bit of time, but it's well worth it. And then you end up with loads of spare rib meat at the end, so you can do all kinds of stuff with it. So we'll just open up the ribs and then get them in our dish. Any sort of oven dish is fine. I've got a cast iron thing here, but any sort of oven tray is going to work. We're going to spread some of the American mustard on there. You can use other sorts of mustard if you want, but I find this kind of mustard works because it's a bit more mild and it doesn't kind of overpower anything. So we'll get that on the ribs and then make sure that's rubbed in really nicely, and we'll repeat that on both sides and just kind of massage that in so it's got a nice coating, and that helps to keep the seasoning kind of attached to it. So as you can see there, I'm just sprinkling a nice even layer over, and that's just literally a mix of paprika and salt. That's it. We will put some black pepper on as well. I mean, you could put black pepper in that shaker as well, but I just had that pre-made, so I just sort of sprinkle that out and then add some black pepper on the end. Just pat it around like that, as you can see, and then a nice coating of black pepper all over it. The black pepper really helps here, so don't be shy with that. So, and that's that. So that's literally all the prep we need to do with that. We'll just literally cover that with some foil, and then we're going to put it in an oven, 130 degrees centigrade, for about 3 hours. Once it's in, you can just forget about it, and you can just start prepping the other parts of the sandwich that we're going to need. So we'll start making up our barbecue sauce here. Try not to wear a white t-shirt like I do, because you will just get tomato splashed all over yourself. So put an apron on, which I do in a second. There you go. Look at that. So it's 2 tins of San Marzano tomatoes. To store the sauce once you've made it, you can get kind of an airtight container like that. Stick what you don't use in there at the end, and that'll keep in the fridge for a good few weeks because it's got lots of vinegar and all sorts in it. So we'll put Worcestershire sauce, probably about 2 tablespoons or so. It was probably about a third of that bottle, and then a similar amount of the malt vinegar. Again, you can fine tune these quantities once it's cooked down and you can taste it. So if you want to make it a bit sweeter, a bit more sour, there's some panela sugar. It's just evaporated cane juice. It's really beautiful, nice caramelly kind of flavors to it. It's just really good sugar to use because it hasn't gone through a massive refining process. And then we're going to just put in some white pepper and a little squeeze of mustard, about a tablespoon of mustard, and then just smush it all up with your fork just to break apart those plum tomatoes. If you're using chopped tomatoes, obviously you don't need to do this, but give it a good stir, bring it up to a simmer, and then turn it right down so it's just really gently bubbling away. And that's going to cook you could probably cook it for like an hour and a half or something. That's probably about 40 minutes in. It's starting to thicken up, as you can see there, but we want to cook that down really thick so it's like a real thick, kind of like a barbecue sauce that you'd get in a sauce bottle kind of thing. So while that's just kind of simmering away, we'll start making our little pickled onion thing. So get an onion, halve it, and then as you can see I'm doing there, I'm just slicing across it, really fine slices. I find in these sort of sandwiches a really, really finely sliced onion is best. And then what we'll do is we'll go through that whole onion, get it in a bowl, good pinch of salt, like be generous with the salt here. And then we're going to use some of this rice vinegar. So it's a slightly sweetened vinegar, but we want a little bit more sweetness in it, so we'll just put a little teaspoon of that panela sugar, and then we'll add in some pepper, black pepper and white pepper. Works really nicely, and then just toss it around. We want it just nicely coated, almost like a vinaigrette almost. Like we don't want it super liquid, but you can kind of fine tune, season a bit more, add a bit more vinegar, just so it's all nicely coated. And once you're happy with that, give it a final little toss around, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the fridge just for as long as it takes to cook those ribs, really. So it's about 2.5 hours at this point that we'll just have that in the fridge. Just cover it with something like, I just tend to use like a plate or something like that because I don't like using cling film. So pop that in the fridge, let it do its thing, and that can just sit there for a while, and then boom, that's 3 hours in that those ribs have been in the oven, and then it'll look like this, super nice. They still hold their form, but they will just kind of pull off the bone if you kind of pull them apart, so they're perfectly cooked now. But what we'll do is, that's our sauce there, that's had a similar amount of time really that the ribs have been in the oven. So It's super thick, and you could whiz it up if you don't want the chunkiness, but I quite like the chunky bits of tomato in there. It just adds a bit more interest into the sauce, really. So what, as you can see I'm doing there, we're just really evenly spreading it around, get it nicely covered across all the ribs, and we'll just put that back in the oven on that same 120, 130 degrees centigrade. And it's only going to go in there for about 20 minutes, and it just soaks in a bit to the meat. It doesn't really take on any colour because you don't really need it to do that. I mean, if you wanted to do that, you could, but it would burn really quick if you start going on a higher temperature. So you just got to be careful with that. While that's in the oven, just doing its thing and finishing off, we'll just get our bread in a pan with a bit of butter and just start toasting that off and just warming that bread through. We want just a little bit of colour on there. It's on quite a low heat, just kind of doing its thing. And that can just do that thing. And then after 20 minutes, boom, there we go. It's been in the oven, super beautiful. As you can see, that sauce is just kind of caked on into the meat. And now what we'll do is we'll obviously get the bones out. So you just really need to just break it apart gently with a knife and a fork. Really 2 forks would do because it just pulls apart. But I get a knife just to run it down the lines of the bone, and then you can just pull that meat out. Now I try and keep, for the sandwich, I try not to pull the meat apart too much. I just try and keep those, those strips of meat as whole as possible, just so you can get that kind of McRib vibe to it, kind of thing. So try a little bit there just to make sure it tastes good. And that's it really. Pull it all apart, and then we can start building up the sandwich. So we'll get that toasted bread, perfect. Look at that, just a nice golden kind of coating on there. We'll add a little bit of mustard and a little bit more of the barbecue sauce because we didn't use all of it to spread across the ribs. There's quite a big batch of it. So we'll just pop a bit on there, spread it all around, get it all mixed up, and you can kind of mix up that kind of mustard and sauce thing, and it just, coat that whole bottom side of that bit of bread because, you want a nice bit of sauce in there. You don't want it to be dry. And then what we'll do is we'll add in some pickles and our onions. So what I did here, I just did a nice even line of pickles on there, just one layer. And then I put in a little sprinkle of those onions. You don't want too many because it will overpower the flavour if you have a load on there. But again, it's up to personal preference. If you really like that kind of oniony vibe, then add more on there. And then onto the top side of that bun, I just added more mustard, a bit more of the sauce, and a few more little sprinkles of those onions. And again, just mix it all up. It doesn't matter. It's all going to be mixed up anyway. So that's perfect. A little sprinkle of onions. And if you want to put cheese on here at this point, you can. But I don't really think it needs cheese. But you could have cheese. I mean, it's not going to hurt. And then just start laying on the pork. So I've got, as you can see, I managed to get about 4 or 5 nice, like proper full strips out. So I'm laying them on first. And then in any sort of gaps, I'll just get the bits that just fell apart and that pulled apart, and just kind of pull those down into the little holes so it's nicely evenly spread. You can get away with quite a bit in here because it's going to hold together really nicely, and because the meat's so soft, it's not going to be hard to eat. So you can smash quite a bit in there. And I mean, look at that. It's just, so good. As you can see, it's not like overly saucy, but it's just nice, and it just keeps it juicy and super good. And then pop the top on. And I mean, look at that, super good. Kind of looks like a McRib, but just a bit more messy and rustic, really, doesn't it? So super soft bread, nicely warmed through, bit of butter, toasted. You've got the soury crunch sweetness of the pickles and the onions, and then you've got that nice homemade barbecue sauce, which is that real sweet sour vibe, and the super succulent pork. Chop it in half, serve it with some coleslaw on the side or some oven chips or whatever you want to do. And I mean, there you go. Look at that. So good. The pork's super tender and delicious. I had to take a bite. I just had to, which did ruin the photograph slightly because I should have really done that afterwards. But there you go. Super tasty McRib sandwich. It takes a bit of time to cook, but it is well worth it. And you can obviously make loads of those up, like it's, because you get so much left over. There's some more videos here. Check them out. Hope you liked it. If you did, give me a like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back with another video soon.